we can't not speak to you about the incredible Peter Frampton Comes Alive. I mean, I often ask people about their big albums and wonder that if they had the thought whilst making them, whether they knew it was going to be big, whether they thought these songs are going to catch on. But obviously, it's slightly different with a live album because the songs are already out there. So, could you have ever imagined that that live record would have taken off the way it did and went absolutely mental? It went crazy, didn't it?
Yeah. No. The only thing I'll say is that the main night where 90%, 95% of the album comes from is Winterland in San Francisco. The acoustic numbers come from Marin County around the corner a couple of days earlier than that. But the main show, we had never headlined in San Francisco for real. And they had adopted me after the Frampton album came out. And San Francisco was way ahead in appreciation of me than anywhere else in the country, basically. And so we decided to do it there, do the live album there. And we had no idea. We didn't even have enough time for a headline show. So that's why we added the acoustic spot, you know. And so when we walked out that night and started playing, we were all in shock, I think, from the reaction. You hear it on the record. There it is, you know. And when we came off, it was one of those nights where, you know, during a tour, every night the band comes off and someone will go, "Oh, I had a great night." Someone will say, "I had a bad night." Someone will say, "I had a mediocre night." But there's those very special nights where you come off and everyone goes, "Oh my God, I had the best night." And it was, well, you can see it was a really good evening. And so I just remember going to the truck outside and standing against the wall as he just played us a couple of tracks. And we were just like, oh my God, the energy level was so high and the audience and everything. And we just said, we've got something really special. That's all we said. We had no idea, knowing full well that live albums aren't usually big sellers. Well, were we wrong?
So. Absolutely. I've got one here from Mark Christopher who says, "Thank you so much for the years of pure enjoyment you've provided us. Frampton Comes Alive really left my turntable. I'd like to know how you created such an astonishingly deep track as Lines on My Face. It's my all-time favorite."
Well, it's actually, I agree with you. It's very hard for me to play my own trumpet, but that is one of my favorites too. And I love playing it live more than anything else. I think it's just always been there in the act, you know. And the way it came about was a breakup with my wife. Basically, it's the Phil Collins story. No, yeah, out of pure emotion like that, you know. Whether it be happy or sad, it can be very inspiring. And I think I let my emotions come out on the page for that one. And I wrote the music and the lyrics in New York City. And because I was getting away from where I lived in England at that time, just because it was a sad situation, you know, so. And that's how the song came about.
Fantastic. And I've got one from Alan Froome who says, "The talk box is such a strong association with yourself. How did you discover it? And what drew you to its unusual sound?"
Well, the very first person, Alvino Ray, in the 20s or 30s, around there, I think, he invented this thing. He was a pedal steel player. And he had his wife behind the curtain with the tube.
Oh.
And so he'd made something, you know, to be like a talk box. And then he had a little puppet called Stringy it's so weird, that would open its mouth and sing the song, with the words. I don't know how they hooked that up, but anyway, so he would play the pedal steel. It would go through the talk box, and his wife behind the curtain, behind the curtain, would mouth the words, and it would look like Stringy was singing it. And there's film of that. There is video of that. And so anyway, I had heard that on a station called Radio Luxembourg, which I don't even know if it still exists. Who knows? But when I was very young, it was the only place that you could hear great rock and roll and American music, R&B and blues and jazz, whatever. Kid Jensen from 7 till midnight every night, and I'd be in bed with my transistor radio. You go to bed. No, I can't. It's Radio Luxembourg. And so, but their call sign was 208. That was their number on the dial. And, but they said, Fabian Stonewall Wayne. And that was the Alvino Ray. He created that. And a lot of American stations copied him and used that effect for their call signs. And then all the stations in England started doing that. Well, definitely Radio Luxembourg. So I went, there's that sound. How do I get that? Well, fast forward to, then I hear Stevie Wonder on Music of My Mind, and he's using it with the synthesizer. And then Jeff Beck did it with a Beatles number, She's a Woman. And Joe Walsh did it with Rocky Mountain Way, not High. That's John Denver. So I'm going, how do I get everybody's getting this, but I'm not. So anyway, we have to go back to All Things Must Pass, which is where Pete Drake, Nashville Skyline for Bob Dylan, he was a member of what we call here in Nashville the A-Team, who's like the Motown musicians, and they play on every record. Well, the A-Team played on every record, and they still do, but the members change obviously over time. So in comes Bob has recommended to George that if you want to do the If Not For You, which they wrote together, maybe you should ask Pete Drake to come over. So he comes over. George says, we got Pete Drake's coming over tomorrow. So we then started doing the more country things, If Not For You. And he sets up in front of me. Literally, I could put my foot out and touch his pedals for his pedal steel. And he's facing me, and George is right here, right next to me. And so in a slow moment, when they used to have to wind the tape back, or change reels, Pete says to me, you want to hear something? I said, absolutely. And so I thought he was just going to play me something. And then he gets out his little black bag and little black box, puts it on the end of his pedal steel, puts a tube in his mouth and plugs this into there. And bingo, there it is, right in front of me. And he's singing and talking. The pedal steel is singing to me with lyrics and everything. And George, you can actually go on YouTube. There's not video, but there's me and George laughing at how incredible it was. George says something. I'm just laughing in the background. But that was it. So I said, oh my God, this is like, I'm having a special moment here. I said, I've been after this sound for so long, since I was like 12, listening to Radio Luxembourg. And I said, where do I get one? He said, well, I made this one myself. I said, oh. So then in comes this, Joe Walsh borrowed that Pete Drake, the one that I saw,
that one, yeah,
borrowed that from Pete Drake's wife and used it on Rocky Mountain Way. And so he then said to Bob Heil Sound, who was our PA guy at the time for most of us who played live, he said to Bob Heil, Hey, this talk box is really good, but it's not loud enough. So he goes, okay, okay, Joe, let me see what I can do. Bingo. He comes up with the Heil talk box. And then Bob gave me one for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And so it was the best Christmas I'd had since I was 12. And then I rented a rehearsal room for like a couple of weeks and locked myself away in there and learned how to use the thing and how to talk with it. And it's a piece of cake now, but it's not so easy when you start. So, but it is pretty easy to do. I shouldn't say that.
Best Christmas present ever. I love that.